Hey everybody, welcome to Unit 5. So first thing I want to point out is your rules of I, or your powers of I, are up here in the corner. Where does I come from? It is the square root of -1. I do want to make sure we are aware that your calculator can help you remember these. So your I button is down here, okay, right above the period, so, or the decimal point. So if we do second I, and let's say you're like, what's I squared again? If you raise it to the second power, it will tell you -1. Okay, and then the 0I, obviously, you can ignore that. But if we wanted to do like I cubed, oh, that's a pi. Second I, come on. And then we cube it, there's your -I. Okay, so you do have your calculators. You can use that to help you. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump down to an operation, and we're going to look at this 2 plus 5i squared. So when we see that, hopefully we are thinking, hey, we got to write that twice. So there are 2 of these, and then we're going to FOIL. So we have first is a 4, we have outside is 10i, inside is 10i, and then last would be the only one I'd be careful with. This is 25i squared. So if I combine like terms here, I'm at 20i, and then I squared is -1. So that's going to turn into really a -25. And then if we go ahead and add our like terms together, I'm at -21 plus 20i. Sometimes your calculator will do that for you as well. So let's see if it likes this one. If we do 2, it was plus, right? 5i quantity squared. And it grabbed the wrong bracket for me there. It can help you with that as well. Okay, so play around with your calculator. Sometimes it'll give you out nice answers. Sometimes it's kind of wacky, but it's always just something to look at. All right, let's go ahead and flip to the next page. We're going to look at solving a quadratic. So if we are solving a quadratic, we always want to set it equal to 0, and then we kind of decide on our method of solving. So when I set it equal to 0, we might say, hey, let's try to factor. And then you realize, oh, that's not going to work. So then we might have to move on to quadratic formula. So we have our A value, our B value, and our C value. And let's go ahead and plug in. So we have -b plus or minus the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, when you get to this step, this is where I would recommend grabbing a calculator and typing in this number underneath the radical. So don't type in the radical, just type in the number underneath the radical. So we're going to type in 8 squared minus 4ac. Oh, we lost my 1. Not that it matters, but come on, 1. Okay, so we're going to get that product of -4, and then we're going to put that back in underneath our radical. So x equals -8 plus or minus, radical is still there, but now you have just a single number. Okay, so -4, the negative is the I. Okay, so the negative comes out as an I, and then that 4 comes out as a 2. So that whole thing is a 2i. And now we're going to divide, if possible. So -4 for the first piece, and then plus or minus I. And that would be an A plus BI form. Okay, let's jump over to the next page. Let's talk about sum and product of the roots. If you're given a quadratic and they ask you what the sum and product of the roots are, instead of you having to physically solve the quadratic and then add the roots together and multiply the roots together, that's a whole lot of work. Instead, if we know these two formulas, we can just look at the equation. So when you add the roots together, it would become negative of our b value all over our a value. So adding the roots together would create a 2. Product is c over a, so that would be a positive 30 divided by 5. And so when you multiply the roots together, you would get a 6. So easy formulas, really just something to memorize. All right, and then before we flip over, I just want to remind you of something. We're going to use this on the next page. We're going to build a polynomial, and when we do that, we will be building some quadratics, and that's going to go into this format. X squared, this is sum minus the sum, and then plus the product. So when we flip over, we're going to see how that's going to help us. We would like to write a polynomial that has this whole list of roots. So first thing I want to talk about is degree, okay? So how many roots does it have? We got 1, 2, this counts as 2, and then we're up to 4, so 5, 6. So that means that I need to make sure that my answer is a degree 6 polynomial, okay? So let's call it, we're going to call it P of X, and let's do the easy ones first, okay? We're working backwards. So we're like, well, if I got an answer of, let's do the 5, that would have came from a factor of x minus 5. Let's do the 0. The 0 would have came from just plain old x. Now these other sets here, these 2 answers came from a quadratic, and these 2 answers came from a quadratic. So we're going to try to write the equation of those 2 quadratics. So I'm going to pull this down. If I focus on these 2 roots, we want to get the sum of these roots and the product of these roots. So sum means take the 2 roots and literally add them together. Okay, sum is 4. Product means multiply. Take the 2 roots and literally multiply them together. Now, they are conjugates, so don't work too hard here. 4 minus I squared, that's really a negative 1, so that's a 5. So, that quadratic I just reminded you of on that previous page says x squared minus the sum plus the product. Okay, so that's for that set. And oh, by the way, your calculator could do this for you and get the sum and product. Okay, we'll do this one in orange. Okay, this one's coming down. All right, so you have plus or minus radical 3. Sum radical 3 plus negative radical 3, sum is 0. Product, positive radical 3 times negative radical 3. Negative plain old 3. Okay, so our quadratic is x squared minus the sum plus the product. So you don't need to include this. You could totally wipe this out and then just make it x squared minus 3. And then that would be your answer right here. So this is what we call factored form, okay? You don't need to put it in standard form. You would just leave it like that. Check your degree, 2, 4, here's 5, here's 6. So we did get the degree we were expecting. All right, guys, that's it for today. See ya.